There are two people who can look at the exact same opportunity and see completely different things. One sees a door, the other sees a wall. Same opportunity, same room, same moment in time, but two completely different realities. And most people assume the difference is talent, or resources, or luck, or some mysterious quality that certain people have and others don't. But that's not it. The difference is what each person believes is possible for them, not what they say they believe, not the answer they give when someone asks if they think they can succeed, what they actually believe in the quiet, wordless part of themselves that operates beneath the surface of their thoughts. The part that decides before they're even conscious of deciding whether something is available to them or not. That belief is not a minor detail. It is not one factor among many. It is the invisible architecture of your entire life. Every decision you make, every risk you take or avoid, every opportunity you pursue or let pass, every version of yourself you allow to exist or quietly suffocate, all of it flows from what you believe about who you are and what you deserve. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Most of those beliefs were never chosen. They were installed. I want to tell you about Marcus. Marcus was the kind of person that people noticed. Not in an obvious way, not in the way that demands attention. But when Marcus was in a room, people could feel that there was something there. A sharpness, a capacity, the particular quality of someone who sees things clearly and thinks about them deeply. His colleagues noticed it. His friends noticed it. Even people who met him briefly walked away with the sense that they had just spoken to someone who had more going on inside than most. Marcus knew it too, not arrogantly, but honestly. He knew he had something, a capability that he had never fully used, a version of himself that he had glimpsed occasionally in moments of clarity that was considerably more than the version showing up every day. The problem was that the version showing up every day kept falling short. Not dramatically, not in ways that were obvious to the outside world. Marcus held a decent job, maintained decent relationships, lived a decent life. But decent was the problem, because Marcus knew, with a certainty that never fully left him, that decent was not what he was capable of. He had started things and not finished them. Not because he ran out of ability, because at some point in almost every pursuit, something would shift. The momentum would slow. The initial excitement would fade. And in the quiet that followed, a familiar voice would surface. Who do you think you are? Not loud. Never loud. Just a whisper. A subtle, persistent, entirely convincing whisper that arrived at exactly the moments when continuing would have required believing in himself a little more than felt safe. And almost every time, without fully realizing he was making a choice, Marcus would find a reason to stop. A reason that sounded logical, that he could explain to himself and to others, that had nothing to do with a voice. He had been doing this for years. He just didn't know it yet. Here is something that most people never fully reckon with. The beliefs that govern your life are not primarily the ones you are aware of. They are the ones running underneath. The ones so deeply embedded in how you see yourself and the world that they don't feel like beliefs at all. They feel like facts, like just the way things are, like an accurate assessment of reality rather than an interpretation of it shaped by everything that happened to you before you were old enough to question any of it. Where do those beliefs come from? From everything you absorbed before you had the capacity to evaluate it. From the things people said to you when you were young, not just the dramatic things, but the small, repeated, ordinary things. The offhand comments, the comparisons, the moments when you tried something and it didn't work, and someone's reaction told you something about what that meant about you. From the environment you grew up in. The unspoken rules about what people like you do and don't do. What is realistic and what is foolish. What deserves ambition and what deserves caution. from your own history of attempts and outcomes, filtered through the emotional state you were in when they happened. A failure experienced while already feeling fragile lands differently than the same failure experienced from a place of security. But the belief it installs doesn't carry that context. It just says, you tried this and it didn't work. All of that accumulated over years into a system that runs automatically below the level of conscious thought, filtering your perception of every situation you encounter, every opportunity that appears, every version of yourself that you consider becoming. And the most insidious thing about that system is this: it doesn't feel like a system. It feels like you. Marcus had a conversation one evening with someone he trusted. Not a therapist, not a mentor with a formal title. Just someone who had known him long enough and honestly enough to say something most people wouldn't. They were talking about a project Marcus had been considering. Something that would have stretched him, that would have required him to show up in a way he hadn't before. And Marcus was explaining, with impressive logical detail, why the timing wasn't right, why the conditions weren't ideal, why it made sense to wait. His friend listened, and then said something simple. You've been explaining why the timing isn't right for as long as I've known you. The projects change. The explanation stays the same. Marcus wanted to argue. He had a response ready. But something stopped him, because what his friend had just described wasn't a series of reasonable decisions made in response to specific circumstances. It was a pattern, and patterns don't come from circumstances. They come from inside. That night, for the first time with real honesty, Marcus sat with the question his friend had handed him. Not what is wrong with the timing, but what is wrong with how I see myself in relation to what I want. And what he found, underneath all the logical explanations, underneath all the reasonable sounding reasons he had accumulated over years, was a belief he had never consciously chosen and never consciously examined. That success at the level he was capable of was for other people, not for someone like him. He couldn't have told you where it came from. There was no single moment, no obvious source. It had been assembled quietly over time from 100 small experiences that each added one more brick to a wall he couldn't see because he was standing inside it. Here is what the brain does with a belief once it is installed. It protects it. Not because your brain is working against you, because your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It creates coherence. It filters your experience of reality to confirm what you already believe, because a mind that constantly challenges its own foundational assumptions cannot function efficiently. So if you believe that you are not the kind of person who finishes things, your brain will notice every time you don't finish something and record it as evidence. It will filter out or minimize the times you do finish things, because those don't fit the story. It will find, with remarkable consistency, exactly what it is looking for. If you believe that good things don't last for you, your brain will be vigilant for the moment when the good thing ends. It will be less present for the experience of the good thing itself, already bracing for its conclusion. And when it ends, it will say, see, that's how it always goes. This is not pessimism. It is not a character flaw. It is a neurological mechanism called confirmation bias, and it operates in every human mind without exception. The question is not whether it is happening. The question is what story it is currently confirming for you, because it will confirm whatever you give it. Give it a story of limitation, and it will find limitation everywhere. Give it a story of capacity, and it will start finding evidence of capacity that it was previously filtering out. The world does not change. Your perception of it does, and your perception is shaped by what you believe. Marcus understood this for the first time, not as a concept, but as a lived reality. He could see, looking back at his own history, exactly how the mechanism had worked. Every time he had stopped short, the belief had been confirmed. Every confirmation had made the belief stronger. Every stronger belief had made it more likely he would stop short next time. He had not been responding to reality. He had been constructing it. There's a word that makes this even more precise. And it is a word that most conversations about mindset and belief skip over because it sounds too simple. Identity. Not what you want. Not what you intend. What you believe you are. Because here is how behavior actually works. You do not act according to your goals. You act according to your identity. According to the story you are carrying about the kind of person you are. A person who sees themselves as someone who finishes things. Not because they have more discipline in the abstract, but because finishing is consistent with who they believe they are. When they want to stop, the identity pulls them forward. Stopping would feel like a betrayal of self. A person who sees themselves as someone who always falls short. Not because they lack ability, but because falling short is coherent with the story. Succeeding would feel strange, unsafe, like wearing someone else's clothes. This is why you can change your habits without changing your results. You can install a new routine, follow a new system, read every book on productivity ever written, and still find yourself back where you started. Because the identity didn't change. An identity always wins. Marcus had a goal. He had always had goals. What he didn't have was an identity that matched them. Inside, in the private story he carried, he was still the person the voice described. Someone who almost makes it. Someone who gets close, but find a reason to stop. Someone for whom the next level is always just slightly out of reach. And until that identity shifted, the goals were decoration. Intentions without architecture. The shift doesn't come from deciding to have a new identity. You can't think your way into a different sense of self. The shift comes from acting repeatedly in ways that are consistent with the identity you want to inhabit. From giving your mind enough new evidence that the old story starts to loosen. Every time you do the thing the old story said you wouldn't do, you're not just completing a task. You are casting a vote for a different version of yourself. And votes accumulate, slowly then faster, until the new identity is not something you are performing. It is something you have become. Let's talk about something that makes all of this harder than it needs to be. The voice in your head is loudest at night. Most people don't talk about this, but it is true. And if you have ever lain awake at 3 in the morning with your own thoughts, you know exactly what I mean. During the day, there is noise. There is movement. There is the business of life to occupy your attention. The voice is present, but it competes with everything else. At night, in the silence, it has the room to itself. And what it does with that room matters more than most people realize. Because the last thoughts you hold before sleep are not neutral. They don't disappear when you close your eyes. They continue working, processed by a mind that does not stop when you do. They shape the emotional baseline you wake up with, the lens through which the new day begins. Most people hand that time to their fears without knowing it. They replay what went wrong. They rehearse the conversations they are dreading. They inventory everything that is unfinished, everything that is uncertain, everything that could go badly. And they do this not from any conscious choice, but because the mind, left without direction, gravitates toward its most practiced patterns. And for most people, the most practiced pattern is worry. Marcus recognized this in himself. He could see that his nights had been a rehearsal space for the old story. Every evening, without intending to, he had been reinforcing the belief by giving it the quietest, most receptive hours of his day. So he changed what he did with those hours. Not dramatically, not with an elaborate ritual that took willpower to sustain. Just a small, deliberate redirection at the end of each day. A few minutes of asking different questions. What moved forward today even slightly? What did I do that the old story said I wouldn't? What am I choosing to believe about tomorrow? Not to manufacture false optimism. Not to pretend the difficulties weren't real. but to give the mind something different to work with in the hours when it was most receptive. The belief that shapes your days is being formed in the quiet you give it every night. What are you feeding it? So, what actually changes a belief? Not positive thinking, not repeating affirmations until they stop feeling false, not reading about mindset and feeling inspired for 2 days before the old patterns reassert themselves. What changes a belief is evidence. Specifically, evidence that contradicts it. Actions taken from a different story about who you are, even before you fully feel that story, that produce experiences the old belief cannot account for. This is the part most people miss. They try to change the belief before they change the behavior. They wait to feel different before they act differently. And because the feeling never comes, because the old belief keeps generating the old feeling, nothing moves. But the mechanism works in reverse too. Act differently, even once, even imperfectly, even with the old fear fully present. And you have introduced a new data point, a small crack in the wall, a moment the old story cannot explain away as easily as the ones before it. Do it again. The crack widens. Do it enough times, and the old story starts to lose its grip. Not because you argued it out of existence, because you live your way out of it, because you generated enough contradicting evidence that the brain, which is always looking for coherence, begins to update. Marcus understood that he had been waiting to feel ready, waiting to believe in himself before he acted like someone who did. And that wait had become permanent because the belief never arrived on its own. It was only ever going to arrive through the doing. So he stopped waiting. He didn't start with the biggest thing. He started with one thing, one commitment, specific and small enough that the voice couldn't generate enough fear to stop him. One action taken not from confidence, because he didn't have that yet, but from a decision that the old story was no longer acceptable. And when he did it, when he followed through on that one thing, something shifted, not dramatically, just slightly. A small but real experience that the old belief had told him he wouldn't create. He did it again and again. There is something important to understand about this process. It is not linear. It is not comfortable. And the voice does not disappear. What changes is your relationship to it. The voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" will still come. It will come when you are tired, when the results are slow, when someone around you expresses doubt, when you make a mistake and the old story rushes in to interpret it as confirmation. But over time, as the evidence accumulates, as the new story grows stronger through the lived experiences that confirm it, the voice loses authority. It becomes recognizable. You begin to hear it not as the truth about who you are, but as the echo of a story that used to run your life. An echo is not the same as truth. You can hear an echo and keep walking. Marcus found this, not all at once, but gradually in the way that real change actually happens. The voice still came, but it no longer had the last word. He had started to accumulate enough evidence of a different story that he could hold the voice alongside that evidence and let them both exist without needing to choose the voice by default. He was not a different person. He was the same person with a different relationship to his own potential. And that difference, invisible to everyone around him, was the difference between a life of almost and a life of actually. Before this video ends, I want to bring it back to you, because Marcus's story is specific to him, but the mechanism is universal. It is operating in your life right now, with your beliefs, your history, your specific version of the voice. And the question we're sitting with, honestly, without defense, is this. What do you believe about yourself when nobody is watching? Not what you say when someone asks. Not the answer that makes you sound like someone with good self-esteem. What you actually believe in the quiet moments, in the private assessment you make of yourself and what is available to you. What does that belief cost you? What are you not started because of it? What have you stopped short of? What opportunities have passed that you explained away with logic that sounded reasonable, but was really just the belief protecting itself? Because here is the truth that the entire story of Marcus points toward. You are not your beliefs. You are the person who can examine them, question them, and choose to act from a different story even before that story feels completely true. That capacity is what separates the life you have from the life you are capable of. Not talent, not luck, not the right circumstances finally arriving. The decision to stop letting an inherited story make your choices for you. That decision is available to you right now. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when the belief finally shifts on its own. Right now, with the doubt still present, with the voice still audible, with everything uncertain, because the belief was never going to change first. Only the action changes first, and the action is always, only ever, yours to take. If this video moves something in you, if something you heard today made you stop and think, like the video, share with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together. See you in the next one.